Oh, you boys, now take my advice. To America I'd have you not be common, for there's nothing here but war, and the murdering cannons roar, and I wish I was back home in dear old Ireland. Those are the words of an Irish emigrant who fled the famine, but ended up in the Union Army and lost a leg in the American Civil War. And now he's warning the folks back home, if you're thinking of following me across the Atlantic, then don't. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, the world's oceans teemed with vessels bearing humans in distress. Slaves, convicts, emigrants, human cargo. People carried largely against their will, in hideous conditions, to far distant shores. And it was to understand their experiences that I wrote this book, Human Cargo, Stories and Songs of Emigration, Slavery, and Transportation. And in writing the book, I learnt some surprising facts. How, for example, the death rates on the emigration boats were often higher than on slave boats, even though the emigrants were paying passengers. How could this be? Well, the slave captains were paid for the cargo they delivered alive. The emigrant captains were paid in advance, so they had no incentive to keep the cargo breathing. Indeed, the more that died, the more space and food for those left behind. Of course, the emigrants who survived and arrived were free, not slaves. But as so often, it was the business that defined the cruelty, as we see today in the Southeast Mediterranean, with those frightened families driven onto the beaches by the traffickers, where they queue patiently. They fix those shiny lifebelts over their children's shoulders. Then they step, scared, onto the flimsy inflatables. And their experiences are so similar to those of Scottish families 200 years ago, cleared from their Highland homes to make way for sheep, then herded onto boats. Next stop, Nova Scotia. The book seeks to give voice to this human cargo, some from today, which is easier, because in modern times, smartphones and journalists can go anywhere. But mostly, it goes to stories from the past. And I've managed to find some remarkable accounts, personal accounts, testimonies, and diaries from people actually on the emigrant boats, on the convict ships, on the slave boats. But history tends only to record the rich and the lettered. What of the masses? Well, here I've turned to folk song. Like that chorus I sang earlier from Paddy's Lamentation, we don't know who Paddy was. It's an anonymous folk song, passed down from singer to singer over generations. But while it's anonymous, it's authentic, because why else did they choose to sing it? The spirit of the song must reflect something that people thought. So folk songs are a valuable way to give voice to ordinary folk. And I've managed to find 25 songs for this book, some well known, but many quite obscure. And along with these songs, there are many stories too. Of course, giving voice to human cargo, charting parallels with the past, is not going to solve the refugee crisis of today. But it may help us find a different way to understand it.
Riley's gone to Liverpool. Oh, Riley, oh man. Riley's gone and I'll go too. Bye-bye.